Okay, looks like we're live. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Sounds good. We'll go ahead and get started with the first committee meeting of the 2021 general session for the Senate Agriculture Committee. Good to see you all over Zoom. I wish it was in real life, but we're doing people's business in the best way we know how. So with that being said, we'll get right down to business. We have technically 5 bills before us. I'm confident we can process the legislation that we need to get teed up for our beginning of our remote session next week. So with that being said, can we please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bouchard.
Excused.
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Cost.
Present.
Senator Wasserberger.
Here.
Senator Boner, or Chairman Boner,
Here.
sorry.
Yeah, here.
You have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
All right, very good. Thank you. So the first Senate file on our docket is Senate File 50, dealing with direct payments from the COVID business relief program to agricultural producers. Just a little bit of background on this bill. This was a bill that we had originally got ready for a potential second or third or whatever special session over the summer into the fall that never materialized. However, with a extension of CARES Act funding till the end of this calendar year, we now have an opportunity to direct the roughly 100 million or so and funds that have not been appropriated by the governor's office. And so the general idea as to why we're having a separate program for agriculture and why even the Business Council went ahead and did a separate program briefly over the fall was that, as mimicking the USDA program, for whatever reason, the federal government saw fit to kind of isolate the ag community in terms of the business relief it provided as part of the CARES Act. And in order to minimize confusion, we went ahead and did something similar. And indeed, there's plenty of programs targeted at the state level to specific industries. So this is one of them. This is an opportunity for us to discuss whether we want to go further. There was some feedback that we got that the governor's, the Business Council program at the direction of the governor was the application period was a little brief, and there's some concern about the requirements that they had to get things done. So I think there's a lot of folks that maybe missed out on that program. And so here's an opportunity to give them that second crack at this program, especially now that hopefully they have their they know how their year was in 2020. They can have some good solid numbers to justify any to show losses that would justify a additional help from the state government. So that being said, we'll look to our attendees and see if anybody's from the Business Council they'd like to go over. It'd be nice to kind of have a update as to how that went already. I just want to recognize the good work that's already been done by the Business Council. So if anybody from the Business Council would like to raise their hand and staff can let them in the room. Otherwise, we can start off. If we don't have anybody, I think it's pretty straightforward what has already happened, and it's a relatively simple concept. We're gonna have to adjust the bill slightly since it was originally intended for a special session. Yeah, we can just go through there. Any questions from the committee or comments from the committee so far on this bill, Senate File 50? Okay, Senator French.
Yeah, for the newbie, if you'll, Mr. Chairman. So will this be any unexpended funds were extended to the end of 21? Is that correct? So this would apply for any of those unexpended funds, and then there may be new funds coming, and the legislature have to deal with it at that time. But this would be good through the end of 2021.
That's correct, Senator French. So we would have to adjust the dates in here. It's a simple amendment. So that's pretty straightforward to go ahead and do that. And it's a good point. We don't know what additional legislation may be coming from the federal level. Right now there's about 100 million in unencumbered funds from that original 1.25 billion. And so there could be more coming down the line. So that's an excellent question that we should consider in the bill draft. There may be additional funds we might want to compensate for that in the bill draft. Okay, any further? Oh, Senator Wasberger.
Just a quick question here, Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate at this time. So there was $100 million available, and how does an agricultural business qualify for funding? What's the process and how do they go through that? Is that through the Wyoming Business Council?
Yes, right. And the way it worked and the way that this bill is drafted is through the Business Council. They had their agricultural relief program. And it was, if I remember correctly, about around $30 to $40 million they expended through that program. It was open for, I want to say roughly a month, maybe even less. I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, very successful program. It was fascinating to see right at the end, or at the deadline, the funds that were requested jumped up significantly. So that's the way basically be mimicking that program. And there's an open question as to how exactly you go about doing it. Do you make sure that you compensate them for realized losses? Is there a per head payment like the USDA program? Since there's lots of different ways that you can, I guess, have this program actually play out. And I think that would be a topic of considerable discussion. I know there's strong opinions in our membership about how exactly those payments should be determined. And it may differ a little bit from the Business Council program that occurred in the fall. So there's nothing specifying exactly how that would work in the bill. I'm not sure if we're prepared to make those policy decisions, but I imagine it would be today. But I imagine it'd be a topic of discussion moving forward. Senator Wasberger.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the question I have, so if a rancher is preparing to sell calves and he sells those calves, but the price is down, does that qualify? Do they say, well, this was the price a year ago and this is the difference what it is today, and then they receive funding for that? Is that how it works?
Right, that's how it worked with the state program. You have to show a loss, and you can. There was some flexibility. It could have been, it had to be recent. You couldn't just cherry pick the highest numbers you had in the past 5 years. It had to be defensible. But yeah, it could be from last year. You could go with a 3-year rolling average, for example, and then it was only the losses, and they also subtracted out any other help you may have got, whether it be through the PPP program or the USDA program. The state program was meant to fill in the gaps that the USDA program missed, because they were very specific. The USDA program said you're going to get X amount per head of cattle, X amount per head of sheep. And they actually missed a significant portion of the sheep industry through, apparently there's some miscommunication at the federal level. So that's why it is important that the state come in and fill in the gaps, because there were a significant amount or some gaps in the USDA program. That being said, they did an excellent job in that program as well. I think they did well north of $100 million in Wyoming put out to the ag industry. So, yeah, go ahead, Senator Wasberger.
So I guess my next question would be, we have such a, I don't know, monopoly within the meat packing industry. Is there any funding within this bill, the 100 million that is being appropriated in 2021, that would be or could be used to develop meat processing plants? Could they qualify for that under this CARES Act?
That was a separate bill that's in the House. So that's specifically for meat packing. I think we have our House Committee Chair here. Maybe he could give us an update as to the status of that bill. I think they're hearing it today. If see Representative Eklund, if he wants to come in here and maybe he could give us a little update as to the status of that bill if he would like. Of course, not to put you on the spot or anything, Chairman, but we'll see if he's wants to give us a little update on that. If not, it's not a big deal, but just know that that's a separate bill that's out there. So, oh, it looks like Representative Eklund, you're in the same spot as Senator Bouchard, maybe on a different side of the building there, huh?
Hello, committee. Mr. Chairman, we started to work on the bill and had a bunch of questions about whether the funding had reverted from 2020 to 2021. We did find out later in the meeting that it had reverted. There were a lot of questions on it. We got bogged down on details and tabled it while they were getting some information for us, got through the other three bills fine. Meat processing is tabled and still alive, and it's an important bill. And I think Senator Wasserberger, somebody mentioned how important it is to distribute the ability to process animals. We just cannot have a system that the producers are left with destroying tens of thousands of animals because we have given too much power to a few big producers. I think it'd be a great plan to get it spread out amongst, especially here in Wyoming. We raise them here, we might as well process them and keep the jobs here and sell, develop markets and sell them here. But it should eventually pass, I hope.
Senator Wasberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess, and I haven't seen that bill, so, but does that bill try and promote small meat processing plants, or would it be very large ones, say 800 employees or something?
I believe there was a limit, and I'd have to go back and look, but there's a limit as to the maximum amount of that a grant could be to one individual entity. And so it was, not even close to what you'd take to, found a large meat packing plant. And I think the overall dollar tag for the whole program was about $20 million, which would be barely enough to do a small to medium sized one if you want to do it in its entirety. So I believe that there's constraints in there to make sure that we distribute the funds as evenly as possible, but also to prevent more of the same problem of these very large but extremely fragile processing plants. I think we all know their limitations now. Do you have that bill handy, Representative Eklund?
Mr. Chairman, I do, and the limit per application would be $1 million. So it could be used by a large process. Mid-size is what we'd call them. I don't know what you'd call. The small ones will process maybe 20 to 50 at the most a week, and mid-size, I'd like to see some that could maybe process 500 to 1,000 a month, something like that. But the chairman was correct. It's $20 million, and there is funding that has reverted 19-point-something million dollars.
Okay, Senator Wasberger, then Senator Cost.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just lots of questions.
Right.
So if we developed and managed to bring online a medium-sized meat processing plant that could do 1,000 head a month, how many total cattle do we have in Wyoming? Do we know what that number is?
Yeah, that was actually a subject of a business council study that came out about February of last year. And so, yeah, there's an answer to that question. I don't know exactly what it is, but the long and short of it, there's a massive demand for that processing capacity in state that we're just barely beginning to meet. And, a lot has changed since February. We've made a lot of progress, but there's still just we produce significantly more than we could ever hope to process in the near future. So yeah, there's still a lot of opportunity to expand based off of the amount of cattle in particular that are raised in the state.
So, Mr. Chairman, one more question.
Mhm.
Can I get a copy of that study?
Well, so I think it's part of our committee materials from the interim if you go online, but yeah, we could definitely send that to you if that's easier.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Okay, Senator Cost, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I can send that to you. I've got it in my records if you need it, Senator Wasserberger. Also, it was about 900,000 head a year. And in our state, we're only processing about, it was between 12 and 15,000 a year total. It's a huge difference between the two. The biggest concern that a lot of people have is the workforce to be able to work in those larger plans. I don't know if Representative Eklund's aware of CWC and the work they're doing with Fremont, but you're able to get a portable for about $400,000, a portable unit that can go from kill to kill and take the animals. So being able to make sure something like that would be allowed in there would be kind of good as well. And I know we're kind of off of our own bill right now, but we might be able to formulate some of this to help that as well. I know there's some energy around the state in working towards wanting to get some more of these smaller, probably not quite that big. I'd say 30 to 50 a week would be more what a lot of them are looking at. That's the information I know right now.
Yep, that's all good information. And yeah, certainly we can get back to the bill. I think that meatpacking bill is that issue is going to be with us for the next several years. And yeah, certainly a lot to talk about, but it's probably best if we focus on Senate File 50 for now. Okay, so committee, any further questions as you kind of look at the bill? And if not, we'll probably go into public comment. Senator Wasserberger.
Mr. Chairman. It is with great sadness that I inform my Senate colleagues that the great Senator Hank Coe has passed. And I just wanted to let everybody know.
Thank you, Senator. Certainly our thoughts and prayers are with his family. And certainly, yeah, we all know Hank, certainly, and have Senator French who took his spot in the Senate here. And maybe it'd be appropriate if we just take a moment of silent prayer for him and his family. Okay, amen. Okay, well, with that, I think it's probably appropriate we just let's just take a 10-minute break with that news, and we'll pick up Senate File 50 here in a little bit. But I think I know I need a break right now, so we'll come back at 2 o'clock if that's okay with the committee, and we'll try to proceed with our business here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is 2 o'clock. Obviously, we've just been hit with some devastating news that we lost Senator Hank Coe today. A stalwart in the Wyoming Senate, a huge part of our institution for decades. And so I felt it was appropriate to just take a little bit of time at least for me to compose myself. And I just want to check in, see if everybody's okay. If you feel like you can proceed with the meeting, and just want to get a check from everybody. Senator Costa, you okay? Senator French, you good? Okay. Senator Bouchard, are you okay? All right. I think that Senator Coe would want us to proceed with the business. Senator Wasserberger, how are you doing? Are you okay? All right. Okay. So like I said, I think Senator Coe would have liked us to continue with the people's business. May God be with him and his family. So that being said, we are on Senate File 50, and we're just discussing the relief program that had been with the Wyoming Business Council over the fall. Very successful program, but there might be an opportunity to take it further. So committee, any further questions on Senate File 50 before we move to public comment? Senator Wasserberger.
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill.
Oh, okay, very good. So we can move the bill and then take some public comment. Would that be the idea? And yeah, okay, so very good. We're on Senate File 50. Any further questions about the bill, committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Looks like we have two folks who want to testify. Mr. McGagnon with the Wyoming Stock Growers, you were up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First, I want to express our sympathy and sadness over the loss of a great friend of ours, who was Senator Coe. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we're very supportive of moving this forward, this legislation with some appropriate date changes in it. But I do have one issue I'd like to call to your attention, and it kind of relates back to the way that this program has been used this past year to help out ag people as well. If I could ask you to turn to page 2 of the bill, lines 5 through 8, specifically ties this to grants pursuant to the ag business, or to the Wyoming Business Interruption Stipend Program, and references Session Laws, Chapter 3, Section 2B. And if you turn to those session laws, that particular section is very specific. It says the Wyoming Business Interruption Stipend Program is hereby created, and it covers the costs of business interruptions caused by required closures. And then it goes on, defines required closures, a closure done as a result of a state or local government issuing an order. And the problem we had with that before, and would continue to be a problem here, is that frankly, most Wyoming agricultural operations did not have a closure. In fact, they can't close because their livestock or their crops have to be taken care of every day, no matter what. They first suffered some severe losses due to market interruptions that were relatable to the COVID. But I would ask that if you move forward with this, perhaps there could be some changes made there to address that very narrow interpretation, which severely limited the ability to utilize this program when it was out this past summer and fall. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions, committee, for Ms. McGagnon? Okay, I appreciate that input. That's very good. And that's a section I had a question about myself. So I'm just looking at, it seems like you've done some work on this already. I'm looking at start on line 2 of page 2, deleting, I might need some help here to make sure I'm technically correct. Deleting starting in section 2B and extending down to line 5 with the stipend program. And then once again, also on line 6, deleting starting with pursuant, and then deleting to line 8 down to the period after section 2B. So it would read any federal funds appropriated in the 2020 special session laws chapter 1 to be used for grants to agriculture business. What do you think, in your estimation, would that be a best way of going about doing that, Mr. McGagnon?
Mr. Chairman, that certainly removes that reference to the need for interruptions. I guess what I would be a little concerned about, and this is probably a question for you to pose to LSO, and that is because the legislation passed during the special session basically allocated all of that CARES Act money or set the parameters for it. In order for this bill to function, does it have to have a reference and be built on the work that was done in that session, or can it do something outside of that? And that's more of a technical question, but from our perspective, what you just proposed would certainly be helpful, just deleting that specific reference to the special session laws. But as to whether some reference back to those is essential to the viability of the bill, I'm not going to offer that opinion.
Okay, very good. I think we can go probably with a conceptual amendment to say funds appropriated from the CARES Act and remove any references to any specific programs through those special session laws. And we can let our staff finesse the details. And I'd imagine that'd be another good way of doing it. So we don't, I'm sure if we try a more detailed amendment, we probably messed it up.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Gagnon. That's a very good point. And I think once again, committee, I think this is going to be a topic of discussion as we maybe put some direction into this law as it goes through the process, or this bill as it goes through the process, exactly how these funds are going to be distributed, because that has been a point of contention. So thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Any further questions for the stock growers? Okay, thank you, sir, for your testimony. Next up, we have Mr. Moline from the Farm Bureau. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Might scare Mr. McGagnon, but I agree with what he said. Of course, the dates have to be changed, but instead of, we support the bill to help out the producers that have been hurt through this pandemic. I'm wondering, given that there will probably be new federal legislation coming out, is there a way to broaden it out so to have that wording that any federal appropriated funds with the associated with the pandemic, et cetera? I don't know the wording. I've been trying to come up with it, but something so that if another fund comes out and it has a different name, that you don't have to come back and re-legislate. As a question, I don't have the answer. I wish I had a solution for you, but I don't. But sitting in support of the bill, and Mr. Chairman, committee, I'd take any questions.
Okay, any questions for the Farm Bureau? Okay, thank you, sir. I imagine that'd be since it's conceptual, it's easy, right? We could just say, according to the CARES Act or any substantially similar follow-along legislation. But yeah, we can absolutely take that into consideration. Thank you, sir.
Well, and, Mr. Chairman, I realize we're not under a time crunch, and Lord knows what's going to come out of DC the next few months. We just don't know, but something that we wouldn't have to come back and rewrite legislation to incorporate what the wishes of the legislature.
Yeah, absolutely understood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any further public comment on this bill? Feel free to there should be a raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to testify. Go ahead and press that now. We'll wait a little bit. I see nothing right now. So that being said, public comment going once, going twice. That public comment is closed. The bill has been moved. Committee, I'll entertain any amendments at this time. Senator Wasberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think on page 3, the end of the bill, we need to change the date. And so I would strike on line 6, 2020 and insert 2021. Does that work for you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Senator Wasberger. Imagine that be corresponding throughout the bill. Any references to 2020, we can, in terms of deadlines at least, we could just change that to 2021.
Mr. Chairman, I would welcome that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Any seconds? second by Senator Cost. Okay, any discussion committee? Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering at the same time, like where we were referring to 2020, should we also refer to Wyoming special session laws? Is this still imposing that, or do we need to consider that in the changes at all?
Oh, yeah, I think the motion was just for the dates referencing 2020, not the, there's also references to the 2020 special session law. So we'd only be changing the actual deadline dates, not the references to the special session. Yeah, that's I think that'd be a subsequent amendment if we want to deal with some of the concepts around the testimony we heard from the public.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. And my question was, do we want to do something with those at some point as well? So that was my reference. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think, yeah, we could take up that question after we vote on this amendment currently on the table. So any further comments, committee? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, that passes unanimously. Any further amendments, committee? Senator Wasberger.
Mr. Chairman, I think on page 2, line 6, the recommendation was to strike pursuant to the Wyoming Business Interruption Stipend Program created by the 2020 Wyoming Special Session Laws, Chapter 3, Section 2B, and then put the period at the end of businesses. Was that the recommended amendment, Mr. Chairman? And if so, I move that amendment.
Okay, yep, that was a specific recommendation to remove the requirement that it comply with the specific provisions of the interruption stipend program. I think we'd have to do some further work to make it even more broader, but that's something we could try to take care of today, or I could just go back to our attorneys and craft some language for committee of the whole. But yeah, I think that would get us a part of the way there, Senator Wasberger. So did I see a second for that? Okay, seconded by Senator Cost. Any further discussion on that one, committee? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. That motion carries. Any further discussion or amendments, committee? I think there is a question, and I hate to do this, but there's currently $80 million, which would be 80% of the remaining 100 million. I'm not sure if we want to try to change that today or how we want to deal with that, especially if this bill wants to deal with any additional appropriations that may be coming down the line from the federal government. Just thought I'd highlight that for the committee here today. If we knew there was only going to be $100 million, I would probably recommend reducing that. But that it's also something I could discuss with our LSO staff to see how we want to handle that in terms of the idea of giving maximum flexibility to the Business Council to determine how it's going to work in case there is more appropriations. So any thoughts along those lines, committee? Senator Cost.
Your point, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your point is exactly what I was wondering about is, do we want to go with 80 or do we want to consider a different amount in there, or what's the flexibility to that to where we could maybe do something a little different? I don't know what the best answer is. I'm tempted to say in one part, I'd like to say we need to probably put it down a little ways, especially knowing how much was taken the last time, but I don't want to cut it short either. So I'm caught between a rock and a hard spot, and I would reference you as the more knowledgeable one to tell me what way to go.
Dangerous proposition there, Senator, but Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a way LSO could craft that to be, an or less type statement or something that's specific? That way we don't have to worry about it as we move forward, Mr. Chairman. Yeah,
I think there's lots of ways we could skin that cat, as it were. Absolutely, it could be, make it I think you said a maximum basically of 80 million, or we can have a minimum number if we want to make it less. We can bifurcate as saying of the currently available funds, this is the amount, but if there's any future appropriation, it'll be a certain amount of that pile of funds. Absolutely lots of ways we can go about doing that, and give the uncertainty. I'm just not sure if we're in a position to deal with that question right now here today. So it could be a part of my commitment to the committee to going back and making sure we get the exact language to allow for what Mr. Moline was talking about, where we want flexibility if there are more funds without having to come back and we don't want to micromanage it to the point where it causes problems later down the road, but we still want to provide adequate direction to make sure that the program works the way we all hope it will. So. If the committee's comfortable with that, I'll work with LSO staff to ask those questions and come up with some options. Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would be able to work this bill, I'm assuming, on the committee of the whole in our virtual meetings, right? Because if we were to hold off to get it until we met in person, it would just make it prolonged before they could actually use it, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely. And that there's nothing preventing us from amending the program once again, and if we come in with an individual bill in March as well, so that might be an option as well. Okay, so any further discussion, committee?
Question?
Okay, question being called. Let's go ahead and call the roll. Senate File 50.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senate File 50 as amended. Senator Bouchard,
Aye.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Senator Wasserberger,
Aye.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, very good. Do we have a volunteer to take this on the floor? Senator Wasserberger, all right, getting your hands dirty right off the bat. I like it. Okay, so very good. Next bill we have for our consideration is our omnibus planning bill, Senate File 37. Do we have somebody from Water Development here that'd like to present this information? I know we do.
Mr. Chairman, Brandon Gebhardt is here, I believe.
That'd be great. Yeah, if you let him in, we'll let him take the lead on this one. Hello, Mr. Gebhardt. Welcome to our remote Senate Ag Committee meeting. Glad you're here and hoping you can walk us through Senate File 37, if that's okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you. I would be happy to walk you through the bill. I hope that you all received an email from me that contains what we call the Blue Book. I'll explain quickly what that is. One of the first things you'll see in that book is a spreadsheet, and that's kind of a summary of what's actually in the bill. And then the bill itself is in this, and then following the bill is support information. If you would choose to look at that, that is there for your use. But I will focus on probably the spreadsheet and the bill itself and try to be efficient going through this. So getting into the bill, the main portions of this, this is a bill for the projects that we have vetted through numerous commission meetings as well as select water committee meetings. These projects, all of these new projects, in fact, have a consultant selected for it. They've gone through our proposal process. We've selected consultants, and contracts with consultants are just waiting for the approval and signature of the bill if it were to pass. So jumping right into it, on page 2 under section 1 is a list of our level 1 new development projects. We start off with the Hoback River watershed. It's a watershed study. The Lander Water Master Plan, that's municipal master plan. That the appropriation request for Hoback was 277,000. The appropriation request for Land or Water Master Plan is 208,000. The next project is the Nordic Ranches Water Master Plan, just what it sounds like. Appropriation request of 63,000. The next project is the Upton Water Master Plan, a request of 153,000. The next project is the Wheatland Water Master Plan, a request of 125,000. The next project is a Lake Caddy Reservoir Full Utilization Study. The request is for 250,000. I'll explain this one a little more in depth. This project, I mentioned that all of these have consultants selected. This one does not. If you're not aware of the situation going on at Lake Caddy, there is a legal dispute going on between some of the landowners and the owner of the reservoir. And it's tied up in courts right now, but a request has been made to the commission to look at potential alternatives that could maybe help with the issues going on there. And at this point, we really don't have a good feel for what we're trying to solve yet. We're hoping that once it goes through the courts or something breaks free in negotiations, that we'll have a better idea. So really what we're doing here is we're asking for 250,000 as a placeholder. We think that that's enough for any type of study that we would do. But it would, if something were to break free and we had this appropriation, then we can react quickly to it and start working towards a solution there. So that one's a little bit different than the other ones.
Okay, so just so I understand, it'd be there'd be no planning, say you'd be waiting to, I guess, move based off of any agreement that the parties may come to. It's not necessarily being proactive in identifying solutions. You're kind of just waiting for that sticky situation to resolve itself, and you just want to be able to move quickly after that.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, or at least provide some guidance as to what a study would be and what it would try to solve. It may not have to be fully resolved, but if we had a little more direction, we can help those folks out, hopefully.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Chairman, carrying on, the last project under this is our annual UW Water Research Program. The funding request is for $283,454. This is a little different. This has a committee that vets the proposals, and this request is for 2 different projects through the UW Water Research Program. And under tab I of your notebook, those projects are listed. The 2 that rank the highest and are ultimately in the request. The first one is titled Improved Forecasting of Water Content, Spatial Distribution, and Aquifer Potential Assessment using Geostatistical and Hydrogeophysical Methods. It's looking at snowpack prediction and runoff prediction. And then it's using it's modeling and prediction of snow using geospatial and hydrologic data. The next project would be improving hydrologic predictions in Wyoming's headwaters through detailed quantification of snow melt. So again, it's a prediction type of a study for trying to estimate what snowfall will be or runoff would be for that. So those are the projects under section 1. The next block of projects are our level 2 projects for new development. We've got 4 projects under this block. Bighorn Regional Transmission, funding request of $146,000. The Byron Rural Water Supply feasibility study for $127,000. The Gillette Water Systems Improvement for $150,000. And the Little Snake River Valley Water Supply Phase 2 project for $163,000. If there are no questions, I will continue on to the next block.
Any questions so far, committee? Okay, please continue.
Thank you. The next block of projects are 2 projects under level 1 projects for a rehabilitation account. The first one is the Highlands Irrigation District Master Plan. request of 192,000. And then the next project is the Lander Ditches Rehabilitation funding request at 242,000. We do have a special condition on the Lander Ditches Rehab project. I'll explain that. After we went through the proposal phases and really when we were selecting the consultant, it was brought to our attention that one of the ditch companies in Lander had some issues with the study. And so the special condition that we've placed on this project was that the city of Lander and the ditch company would have to concur on the final scope of work before we would execute an agreement. So there is a little potential that could slow that project down if that were not to occur. So that is that for that block of projects, if there are any questions.
Okay, any questions, committee? I think we'll have some testimony on that Lander project here in a little bit once we get through the presentation of the bill. But any questions right now? Okay, please continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final block of projects are amendments to existing projects. The first one under amendments, this is for the LaPrelle Irrigation District Rehabilitation Phase 2 project. As many of you may be aware, one of our studies ultimately ended up finding an issue with the LaPrelle Dam owned by the LaPrelle Irrigation District. Our studies determined that dam had reached its useful life. Essentially, it's under orders now with the state engineer's office, limiting how much can be stored in that reservoir. Fear of failure is the major concern there. There's a real safety issue. So where we are with the study right now is we have essentially determined a preferred alternative. And so now the next phase would be to further the design of that preferred alternative, perform some geotechnical investigations, and then enter into some of the permitting for that. And so the funding request at this point would be for $4.3 million. I will also say that we had a special commission meeting pertaining to this project. And so what we have done with that commission meeting, we have authorized the office to use this $4.3 million as leverage to go out and find potential federal funding, if we can find that. We've made an application for some federal funding. So we're really trying to leverage this funding to increase and spread our dollars a little more so we can get further down the road with this appropriation. And then the remaining projects, the Fontenelle Dam and Outlet Works infrastructure project, the Glendale Reservoir full utilization, Clear Creek storage, and the Nowood River storage Alkali Creek project. Those are all time extension to existing projects. There's no additional funding requests. It's just time extension to existing contracts. And then, Mr. Chairman, the final section of the bill is a fund transfer, and it ties to the LaPrelle Dam project. And simply what we're asking in this bill is to transfer funds from our Water Development Account 1 to Water Development Account 2. It's an internal transfer, but we feel that it needs legislative approval. So we're asking for that fund transfer to fund that 4.3 for LaPrelle. And Mr. Chairman, that's essentially the bill. The total appropriation request for all projects at the bottom of the spreadsheet is $6,679,454. And I'll note that a majority of that, the 4.3, is for LaPrelle, which is kind of a unique situation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate the good work as always. And your preparation with this bill committee. And I kind of missed the binders with the little tabs on the side, but I just found out that if you do the there's a little tab icon on the side of the PDF and committee. You can, if you click that banner on the left side, you can go back and easily click on all the projects if you want to learn more information. So the diligence of the Water Development Office in providing easy information to the legislature continues even in a remote setting. So thank you. Committee, any questions or comments on this bill? Senator French.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gebhardt, I'm new to this, so bear with me. In all of these different categories that you list, anywhere from 3 to 5 or whatever the number is, are they prioritized? On level 1, I think there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 requests there. Is there a prioritization, like the most urgent along the lines of urgency, and all through the document? I mean, as a farmer, water's my life, so I kind of get this, but are we going to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars when the state's short of money? Some of these bubble to the top. They're urgent, like it sounds like Laprelle is, and but studies that may just sit on the shelf, it's I don't know, kind of a concern to me. I know this has been talked about for months and months, so I'm coming in at the end of this process, so bear with me. But to do a whole bunch of studies, and if they just sit on the shelf, to me it seems like throughout the whole thing, have a priority list of Laprelle's number 1. We don't want a repeat of the Goshen County ditch washing out and wiping out those folks over there. Let's fund the studies for that, and then let's fund fixing it, and then let's go to number 2 next year or whatever. Do you get where I'm coming from here?
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator French, I do get where you're coming from. One of the things that I will say, following the crossover of bills, you guys will be reviewing our second omnibus water bill, and that's for construction. So really what you see here is this starts a process of planning that we vet projects, and we really look at alternatives for each of these and try to decide what are the best alternatives to take forward to actually put things on the ground. And so that goes through this process, and I value this process because I think these studies do a really good job of picking the preferred alternative and the best alternatives. Maybe not the cheapest, but I do feel like we get the best bang for our buck. And we view this as this process helps us determine good investments with state money. So I do really value this process, and there is a priority to this. And if funding were short, then the priority system would come into this, and projects would be prioritized that way. We are not generally funded. You may not know this. Under tab A of the notebook is a description of the water development program. Our funding for these projects comes from a percentage of the mineral severance tax distribution. So all of our accounts are funded as a percentage of that. We've got 3 accounts that are funded through that account. So it is not general fund, and it's a percentage of that. So looking at the Craig reports and what we're hearing, that is still going to be sufficient to continue funding the program at the levels that it is. And so I understand times are tough, and we are preparing for that. But I do really value these planning studies, and even if they don't continue through our program, I think it's still a value to the individuals to help them prioritize their spending and the rehab of their facilities.
Senator French, follow up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gephardt. I just don't want to get into a situation where we do 15 or 20 studies for the tune of millions and millions of dollars, and then we can't fund all those, and they sit on the shelf. And then somebody says, "Oh, we have the funding for that," and they say, "Well, God, that study, that's 4 years old. We need to do another study because we need an updated current study." That's just where I'm going with this.
Mr. Chairman,
Go
Senator
ahead.
French, I understand that completely, and it is not our intent. We prefer to move these forward just as fast as we can. I understand your concern, but I will say that typically, this year's an anomaly only because of LaPrel, but typically of the funding that we do on average, 7% of the funding we do goes to planning studies and 93% goes to construction. So I feel like we do really put work on the ground fairly efficiently. I understand your concern, but I do think that these planning studies really lay down the roadmap for proper investments and how to make good decisions with the money we do have.
Okay, just to follow up a little bit on Senator French's question, can you just go a little bit more detail, maybe give some concrete examples of these master plans and how they result in actual work? Do you have a percentage of the plans that result in actual stuff happening, or most of them sitting on a shelf somewhere? Do you have just a little bit more information as to the tangible value of these master plans?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I have a percentage of the work that comes out of the studies, but I would say that just looking at our construction bill, I think we have maybe 2 projects out of the entire construction bill that have not come through these planning studies. So all of the majority of the construction bill projects have come out of these studies. And I think that's typical of every year. If there's a number you would like us to get, we can certainly look into that and provide that at a later date, but I don't have that at my fingertips. Apologize.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I understand. And it's obviously part of an ongoing discussion as we obviously had this over the interim too, looking at the way this infrastructure is aging, and just I guess share a little bit of Senator French's concerns, just because it's the way that it's worked for decades. In the past doesn't mean that's the best path forward. So I guess no rush. In fact, this could probably even wait to the interim. But just so you're aware, my question is of the plans, not the projects that actually happen, but of the plans themselves, how many, roughly speaking, actually result in a project. So totally understand you don't have that right now, but that's something that's on my mind as well. And just so you're aware. Senator Wasberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just many years ago when I was in the House, I served on the Select Water Committee for 4 years, actually. And I came to the realization that the studies that are done at level 1 are absolutely critical to the overall success of the program. But I would like to ask Director Gebhardt a question that during that time we had 2 dams that we built. We built the High Savory Dam, and then we also built the Tyhack Dam, which is very close to my cabin. And I spend a lot of time actually fishing there and watching people recreate there, and just amazed at the usage of that, the multi-purpose of that dam. And so my question is, and I really enjoyed being on the Select Water Committee, but my question is, why haven't we built more dams?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wasserberger, we are right now, we're in the middle of construction of the Middle Piney Dam On the western side of the state, we are about to start construction of the Levitt Reservoir in the northeast corner of the state, north central. And then following that quickly will be the Alkali Creek Reservoir. That will probably go to construction, I'm guessing, next year. And then we also have a couple other reservoir projects that are lagging a little bit behind that, but we have New Fork Reservoir down by Savory. We've got the Clear Creek Reservoir up near Buffalo. And then we're looking at modifications to Fontenelle that would provide additional storage. So we are actively pursuing reservoirs. Some of them, they just take so long to permit. They can be 10 or 15-year project from inception to construction. So they take a long time, but it is a big priority for the program, and we are close to building several at this point.
Great. Senator Wasberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick follow-up. At that time, one of the major issues that we faced was the North Platte lawsuit, and I've kind of lost track of that issue. I remember when the Supreme Court made its decision and reading about it in the paper. I was just wondering if you have any follow-up or advances on where the issue is today.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Washburger, the decree has been finalized quite some time ago. One of the things that spawned from that decree is the Wyoming's involvement in the Platte River Recovery and Implementation Program. That was it's a big program, and it has to deal largely with endangered species. And really what it does is it serves as a alternative for environmental endangered species acts that essentially what it's doing is it's helping us to continue to develop and use water in the North Platte system. So the decree is finalized. We're living by both Wyoming and Nebraska are living by the law of the decree. Things have really settled down with that. It changed it. It may have changed the way we operate, but things are operating just fine as far as I know.
Okay, any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you, Mr. Gephardt. Stay close by here as we take some public comment. So if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and open up to public comment. We have Senator Case here with us. Welcome, sir, to the Ag Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was really shocked to hear the news about our friend Hank Coe. I really appreciate the way you handled that. It was really great. And I just, one thing I know about him is every time there was a speed limit bill, he was always there for raising the speed limit. So if there's a race to get in heaven, Hank Coe's going to get there first. I really do believe it. So anyway, thank you for doing such a swell job on that. I'm really in an awkward position today. I'm here to speak on the City of Lander ditches rehabilitation project. It's now a level 1. The application was originally for a level 2. And I'd really like to ask you just to remove it, to delete it from funding for this year. And I need to give you a little bit of history. For almost as long as I've been in the legislature, I've been president of the Dickinson Creek Company. That's what it's called now. And it's a old network of ditches that run through they start from a diversion on the Poposia River to the south of town, and they all network through town on the west side of the Middle Fork of the Poposia, and they serve agricultural lands north of Lander. But they go through areas that were all originally, agricultural, and they are a system of ditches that were originally just kind of sloughs and channels from where the river changed courses and things. And so there are very, very old water rights on this. This is my water certificate, and I don't know if you can see it. I can see it's reversed in here, but it's actually from Elwood Mead. And folks that know that he was the first state engineer in Wyoming, he helped write the water law and the Constitution. So all the people on my ditch have certificates like this. And they believe they have territorial water rights. And if you go and look, and some of them are back to 1886 and things like that. So they're the oldest rights on the Middle Fork, and some of the oldest rights in the county. So this Dickinson Creek Company is just a informal company. It's not a irrigation district. It's not anything. These water rights are, they've never been formally drilled down to the actual property level. They're all at the level of 40s. And it's really a confusing situation. And the city, of course, they've expressed a lot of interest, and their interest in this study is to the fact that these old sloughs and ditches, they use them for storm drainage. In fact, they have an active storm system where there would be grates on the streets, and there are even pipes that take it and put it into our system at times. So it's a mishmash. And in the historic years, a lot of the floods have come about following these low areas of the old sloughs and channels. And that's the way the town has been exposed to flooding. So the city's interest in this is storm drainage, by and large. They also are concerned with seepage from the ditches. You know, the whole town, a lot of this area was kind of swampy. My folks tell about how swampy it was when in parts of our property, you know. So so the city installed, I know this is a long story and I apologize, but the city installed sewers that were open bell clay pipe sewers and some ductile iron. And that picked up a lot of the groundwater, helped to make everything a little bit more habitable for construction. And that diverted a lot of water over through the sewer ponds into the Paposha. And so, well, that got to be a problem because of the EPA, and they would exceed the capacity of the sewer pond. So they lined the ditches recently, which has caused a little bit of a problem with respect to the groundwater not having somewhere to go. But this is primarily an application by the city of Lander with respect to storm drainage. Now, that's not a purpose that Wyoming Water Development Funds can actually be used for. So the application has been sort of jimmied up to have more than one purpose. I'm not necessarily opposed to those purposes. Where the problem gets in with us is that it forces a scrutiny of our water rights. And this is the concern that I presented. I think the city knew that we were going to be concerned because they began their discussions with water development back in February and even some in January, the last week in January of 2020. There were even discussions going back and forth, and there was proposals on the table about what it might look like. Unfortunately, they never included us in the Dickinson Creek Company and all these property owners, more than 200, I might add, that we didn't find out about it until the third week in July, when one of the engineers that was bidding on this, or scoping it out, I guess you could say, contacted me and said, "Hey, what's this deal on this water rights stuff?" And I didn't know what they were talking about. And the city had a public hearing. I guess it was approved in part through a council meeting, but nobody told a single member, a single property owner, that this was happening and what the implications were. Well, I became very concerned, and I did contact Wyoming Water Development, and they've been great. Mr. Gebhardt has been great. He suggested this idea of having the project not proceed until the scoping can be figured out with the Dickinson Creek Company. And we've been trying to do that with the city. We really have, but it has not been successful. And I can tell you why, because the city doesn't actually have the ability to decide on it. Every time we go to the city with a proposal, they say, well, we'll run this by water development. And so it always goes back to water development. And we find that we can't really achieve what we want. What we really want to achieve is to have more time with respect to the water rights. And we don't want to throw them on the table and have them all opened up right now, because it will be a very difficult mess, and it'll put us, we're just a volunteer organization. This is going to cost us thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. The best way would be for us to become something like a public entity, like an irrigation district, possibly some kind of an improvement district, or possibly a water conservancy district, I guess. But none of those are very easy to achieve. And if you're going to make the water rights match what's on the ground now, that requires a permitting process that involves each and every small homeowner, in essence, sending out registered letters to all of the water users on the Middle Fork system. Now that's hundreds of registered letters by a couple of 100 different water rights holders. And if you're getting my drift, it is extremely complicated to do. And we're like, oh, we do want to do that someday, but I have no idea how to get my arms around that. And so it has been, if we were a public entity or formed a public entity, we might be able to do that with just a couple of mass mailings for everybody piling in, or the district or whatever the entity might be able to rectify those water rights on behalf of everybody else. But we have no way to achieve that now. And so we tried negotiating with the city to get the water rights out of the scope. And the trouble is, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not as, I apologize. I'm not as knowledgeable as this process, but the whole problem comes down to 41.2.114, Roman under A, little I, letter C. And that says that for any level 1 reconnaissance study, that in cooperation with the state engineer, you have to assess the status of water rights, including existing conflicts and recommendations for resolution of the conflicts and other potential obstacles. So even if we agree in the scope that we don't want to do the water rights, the law says you got to do the water rights. And I'm not arguing with the law, really. I'm just saying it doesn't work. And so I went to the city and we said, how about helping us to become a public entity like a district so we could resolve these water rights in a more streamlined way? City said they can't do that, that they don't have the ability. Went to the conservation district. This was even before this study came about, and asked them to help us get started in forming a public entity. They agreed at first, and then it went to their board, and the board decided they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. We weren't asking for anything more than just some organizational help, sponsor a forum, let people educate people. So it's a real conundrum for me. I'm a senator in this district. These people are my constituents. They have property. It's very important to them. Their water rights are important. They're also very concerned that in doing a storm drainage thing, the city's going to put gigantic concrete paths through their backyards. All these people, they pump out of the ditches and they have water features. You can imagine in a more than 100-year-old urban stream system that's very, very important to people. So my quandary is, this is going to drag us down where we're not going to be able to hang in there. And we really need to be some kind of public entity first. And the water rights issue, the resolution there will be territorial water rights lost, because here's the situation. There are places where people have water rights. They have certificates like I have, but they're not close to a stream anymore because it's a half block over and there's a street and there's no conveyance to there. Okay. There's other people in the 1920s that gave their water rights to the city. The city came around and said, look, you're using this ditch, but we're supplying water through a tap, and you can have pressurized water to water your gardens and lawns. So why don't you sign your water rights over? A lot of people did. Some of those people are still pumping out of the ditch, 70 years later. Sometimes we fight them on it, and sometimes we let live. But it is a cantankerous situation. None of these people really understand the implications of this study and what rectifying the water rights would do. So this whole thing's kind of premature in my mind. I know the city's been working really hard to do this, but they really made a big mistake by not including stakeholders early. And I will say that water development is talking stakeholders over and over and over, but they have done that since I became involved. Well, I think they probably intended to do that all along, but the stakeholders were not included in any of these discussions until almost 6 months after the initial discussions about this study. So I'd ask that we just remove it from the bill. It'll save a little money this year. I think the city has other options as far as storm drainage, and we're willing to still work with them, but this takes a hammer away that's just that's a killer for us, a killer for my constituents as standing here as a senator, and I'm a member of this ditch company too. I don't think my water rights are really involved in this, but probably I suppose they could be. So I just need to lay it on the table with you and ask, as the sitting senator from the district where this affects, and tell you this long story and ask you to remove it from the bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator Case. Any questions, committee, for Senator Case? Okay, just so I understand, so this ditch company lies within the city limits of Lander, is that correct? Or is it out in the county?
There is bits of it that are outside of city limits, but it is probably 90% in the city limits.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And have you talked to anybody on Select Water about this? Have you got their impression where they were at? Just a little bit more background in your discussion with our fellow legislators. I'm thinking of Senator Hicks being chair of Select Water. Any background on that?
Mr. Chairman, I've tried to call Senator Hicks yesterday and the day before, so we have not connected. When this was up earlier in the fall, Select Water met and the Water Development Commission met. There were lots of concerns expressed. It came in as a level 2 study. One that the Senator Driscoll and Senator Hicks both expressed concerns that the ditch companies are private, and this is private property. This is not public, and we're not a public entity, so we're not qualifying for funding, and that there was a constitutional question involved. So they suggest, I believe it was Mr. Porcel, who suggested at that meeting that it be taken down to a level 1 study, which I don't understand how that resolves constitutional questions about private property, but I do understand that it doesn't really require a specific sponsor. But I'm a little bit ignorant of that, and I apologize. But so there was, and then there was considerable discussion, and it was brought up by Senator Hicks that this is largely a storm drainage deal that doesn't fall under water development, because storm drainage is not a beneficial use under the law. Doesn't mean it's not important. I'm not saying that. And the city engineer was there, and he said, well, there's other things, but the truth is it is a storm drainage thing, and there's a seepage environment. These are environmental issues. And I'm not sure that should be under water development either. So that was the discussion. And one thing, if you had a standing committee amendment that said remove this, Mr. Chairman, and those members of Select Water wanted to divide the standing committee amendment, if you had other things, they could certainly speak on that, and I would respect what they say. But I'm not going out on a limb here to tell you that they had concerns. They did approve it with the idea that we could work this out with the city, which was Mr. Gebhardt's good idea. But the trouble is, because of the law, we can't work out what's the problem for us, which is the water rights. We'd really like them to work out historical use and, recognize what's on the ground. And this says they can't do that. No, we can't do that with this study, with the scope. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
And that was my final question. That looking at the summary, it says that the contract execution would be contingent upon the City of Lander and Dickinson Creek Ditch Company's concurrence on tax identified in the scope of work. And so your mind that is not sufficient coverage for you. It sounds like there's no resolution handy, and if I understand you correctly, there's just no point in including it given that circumstance.
Mr. Chairman, and I know Mr. Gebhardt was really working hard to make this work, and that was a really good suggestion. And I thought, and then we started negotiating. We said, well, let's just get the water rights issue out of here. We're willing to help you with storm drainage and all this. But the truth is, the city kept saying, we can't do that. It has to go to water development. We working with a staffer at water development who's doing a good job, but they would come back and say, no, you can't modify that part. It's just been kind of a mess. And then I really did sit down and look at the law, and the law says that a level 1 study has to look at water rights. I don't think we can take it out of the scope.
Okay, thank you, Senator Case. Committee, any questions, Senator Cost?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Case, is there any solution to it? Do you see anywhere down the road where removing this now and down the road something may come out of it, or is this just going to be a mess for a while? Or for a long time, forever?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, well, it has been a mess for a long time. I think it's been on the state engineer's radar. I think we have more tools. I think it was last year we passed the storm drainage utility that a city can have within the boundaries. So that is a real possibility. I think it gives the city the chance to assess fees on the citizens and to make construction projects and to use eminent domain, all of the things necessary there. That's kind of scary to us too, but that is a tool that's on the table. I think our solution is that we need to be an irrigation district. I really see it. It's just, we're a volunteer group. You don't have to belong to us to get water. And we don't have a way to shut your water off really, because if we try to get somebody at the end of the line to have water, it goes by your house anyway, and you'll sneak out there and throw your pump in. So I think we need to be a district, and that'll be under the auspices of the district court. But forming a district is not easy. If you have 12 members on a ditch or 20 members on a ditch, yeah, let's form a district. Makes sense. If you have 200 different property owners and it's basically yards through town, it's a little bit more of a challenge. Now, I've been working on the law, and it says that you don't have to have every piece of property. So there's a way to form a district without everybody being in, and that's a possibility. But Mr. Chairman, that could be 40, 50 grand to try to get that. Maybe it would be more. That's what we really need to be able to do on our end. And then I think the district could help and get to the state engineers' issues and everybody's issues with water rights. will mention that nobody wants to lose territorial water rights, because if we lose them, that affects our relationship with Montana and the Missouri River and the Bighorn Decree and things like that. So, but how we get there is kind of tough for me. I do think there are more tools than we had before.
Okay, any further questions, committee? Okay, Director Gebhardt, do you want to respond to this conversation at all, or?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to dispute anything you said. I think he was accurate in that. I will say the intent of the project is more than just looking at the water rights of the Dickinson ditch. There are other ditches that are the same issue in this town. There are bigger problems than just the Dickinson Creek. I will also say that to Mr. Case's point, we weren't aware of any controversy with this project until late. So we've tried to resolve it, and I was hopeful that that caveat of coming to terms would help with that. But this has been vetted through the commission and select water, so I'm not going to advocate that we pull it. But I also understand that the legislature has the authority to do just that. But I was hopeful, I still am hopeful that a resolution could be made to come to a scope that would benefit everybody. But I don't know that everybody feels the same way. I think some education could occur on what it is these studies do as far as water rights and really what the emphasis of those studies are, that we would have to do. And we would be willing to work to that if the negotiations continue.
Any questions for the director committee? Okay, thank you, sir. Any further public comment on, I guess we'll ask first about this issue with the City of Lander's request. Any further members of the public that want to discuss this particular part of the bill? Go ahead and press the raise hand button so we can see you. Okay, looks like this is it. So thank you, Senator Case. Certainly appreciate your diligence on this, and I imagine it's your district, so I'm not going to predict the way the committee is going to vote. But I will say that if we do vote to remove it, then we will have that discussion and committee of the whole, as Senator Case alluded to, and then we can get further discussion on this topic.
And Mr.
So,
Chairman,
go
I
ahead.
thank
Yeah.
you. If you have other amendments, and this is in your standing committee amendment, it can easily be divided out and discussed separately if that's a concern of the committee. And I will say that, maybe if we could sit down and have all these discussions first, I'm reaching out to the director, then we come back with an application next year, maybe that would be a good thing. We sort of feel under the gun right now, and I appreciate it. And I want to thank the director. He's been just well to work with on this. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, committee. Any further public comment? Just on general in this omnibus planning bill. Go ahead and press the raise hand button now. Okay, seeing none, committee. Looks like public comment is closed. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill. Couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So moved by Senator Cost. Is there a second? Okay, second by Senator Bouchard. Thank you. Any amendments? Senator Cost, go ahead.
I'm going to be brave and move that we remove Lander from it as suggested by the senator, with the idea that hopefully they can get this worked out and resubmit it in the future.
Okay, very good. The Lander, it looks like Lander Dishes Rehabilitation Project is what you're talking about, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. You have a second on that motion? Okay, second by Senator French. Okay, so we got a good discussion about that, committee. Any further discussion on removing that particular request? Okay, all right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 3 ayes, that motion carries. Once again, committee, that's certainly not a final determination on the fate of that project, but certainly guarantees that we're going to have that discussion on the floor, as it sounds like we certainly need to. So any further discussion on the bill overall? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senate File 37 as amended. Senator Bouchard,
Aye.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Sorry,
Aye.
Mr. Io. Senator Wasserberger,
Senator Wassenberger votes aye by proxy.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. So 2 down, a few more to go, committee. We'll go ahead and just take another 10-minute break. Oh, Senator Bouchard, you got something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I have to duck out. Do you guys, do we have a problem with the quorum or what?
I think we're still in good shape. Senator Wassenberger voted by email on the remaining 3 bills, and he should be back by 4 o'clock. So long as Senator Cost and Senator French stick with us through the whole time, we'll be good on a quorum. You guys are good to go. Yeah, we should be good. And if you want to vote by email, Senator Bouchard will announce your proxy if you're not back in time. Just the same way we did with Senator Wassenberger, if that's agreeable to you.
Sure.
We'll just do it that way. So yeah, appreciate it. I understand you're suddenly very busy now, and yeah, we'll be fine with the quorum. And Senator Wassenberger should be back by about 4 o'clock. Anyways, so
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. So long as the remaining 2, our Park County delegation stick strong with us, we'll be set. So, we'll go ahead and just take a quick 10-minute break, come back at 3:20, and we'll continue with the last topic, which is animal abuse. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back in the Senate Ag Committee. Our last topic for today is our animal abuse bills, another topic over the interim. And we have 3 bills dealing with this particular topic. So what we're going to do, senators, is I'll go over the 3 bills we have briefly, and we'll take public comment on the topic in general. So for members of the public, feel free to, if you have a specific concern or a discussion on a particular bill, make sure you point that out. Otherwise, we will just kind of take general public comment before we go into working on bills. But before we get to that committee, we'll just go ahead and go over what's in the legislation itself. And I'm just going to be very honest here. I think that we need to focus on Senate File 25 and 26. 24 was kind of a first crack at this issue, and I think it's basically doesn't do much compared to Senate File 25, which does a material benefit to several issues we had throughout the state. And so I'll just start with 25 before going on to 26. And if anybody has any questions about 24, we can take a look at that too. But as far as I'm concerned, we'll probably just leave that one behind and focus on the other 2 bills here. So Senate File 25 was a result of a couple different issues, both dealing with the expense of keeping an animal or animals impounded as a animal abuse case winds its way through the court system. What we found, for example, in the city of Cheyenne, if you have a large number of animals that have to be taken care of, it maybe is a legitimate concern, legitimate animal abuse case that needed to be prosecuted. But they actually ended up dropping that prosecution because it's just so darn expensive to take care of the animals. In this case, they're living beings, but they're also evidence. So we had the other extreme, and I think Senator French, you even discussed a little bit something similar happening in your neck of the woods, but of a individual's horses being taken from them, concerns about their welfare, but were actually sold before the trial occurred, and that individual ended up being not guilty. So there's some serious property rights and due process issues with the way the statutes are now. And the nice thing about this bill, Senate File 25, is it kind of alleviates both ends of the issue, if you will, both concerns about prosecutions being dropped, as well as the individual's due process rights being tread upon by the state. So from a prosecutor's perspective and a defense perspective, I hope that we have a good proposal here to alleviate those concerns. And the way you do that basically is you have an opportunity to get before the judge to determine the how the animals, the ownership of the animal, whether it's going to be retained by the owner or whether you're going to give the government entity that's taking care of the animal the opportunity to either sell or put up for adoption or otherwise dispose of the animal in question. So we have new language here starting on page 2, and basically just goes through and this is copied based off of the Idaho statute. New language there talk about any person at the top of page 2, any person with authority to enforce this section. So it could be a law enforcement officer, could be a member of the livestock board, especially when you start getting into Title 11. And once again, there's that enumerated probable cause. You have to have probable cause. That's the case no matter whether we put it in statute or not, but it helps clarify what the standard is for impounding an animal they believe is being treated cruelly. We also, when we get into paragraph 1, we define what the reasonable costs are when you post a bond if your animal is taken from you and there's a concern about your treatment of the animal. It defines exactly what the reasonable costs are. Ultimately, that's going to be up to the judge, but we give them some direction there at in lines 15 and 16. Going on, and after subparagraph I, you get a little bit more detail that the bond will be good for 90 days. Make sure they file within 10 days. And then, of course, you have an opportunity to extend the bond if it goes past the initial 90-day point. If they don't post a bond, then once again, they can dispose of the animal. Once again, that word disposal is defined on page 3, line 20. Important concept there. That means you can place out for adoption, sell, or destroy. Obviously, we have to leave that up to the people making the decision, depending on the situation. And once again, they need to, the owner should be responsible for the costs. So once again, the posting of the bond doesn't necessarily mean that they doesn't prevent them from disposing of the impounded animal if they follow the procedure laid forth in this legislation, or if the court ultimately orders the forfeiture of the animal. So a little bit more detail about the bond on paragraph 4. Talk about, gives them, whoever's detaining the animal can draw the bond from the actual costs. And it has to be actual costs. So there's some sideboards in there for that element. And once again, going on to page 5, talking about the bond, or subparagraph 5, talking about the bond. Still, any remaining amount will be returned to the owner or keeper of the animal. So just a little bit more detail about how that bond works through those first 5 subparagraphs. Now, the important part here, the important concept here is on subparagraph 6, starting on the bottom, page 4, talking about whoever has the authority to enforce our animal cruelty laws. Excuse me, let's see. Can file a petition, that's right, requesting the court issue an order forfeiting the animal. So this is the main element in this bill that allows the person who's detained the animal, or the entity that's detained the animal, to get before a judge and get both parties before the judge to determine ownership of the animal, whether it's going to be forfeited or not. But there's some stipulations on the middle of page 5 as to you have to actually have possession of the animal if you're the person enforcing these statutes. It has to be, you have to be waiting for the court case to reach its conclusion, and there's obviously there's been no final determination as to the disposition of the animal. So going on to paragraph 7. We're going to set a 14-day time limit, but understanding that it may not be reasonable within our court system or possible in all instances. So that's the goal, is 14 days, but that's why we see, hearings shall be conducted within 14 days or as soon as practical thereafter. So it's important to have that 14 days in there to make sure it's accomplished in an expeditious manner. However, we understand that there's lots of pressures on our court system. So just acknowledging that. The hearing is once again only to determine whether the animal will be forfeited or not. And then we see on paragraph 6, the burden of proof once again, and we'll hopefully have we had some good input from both prosecutors and defense attorneys over the interim to make sure we got this in a place that it was agreeable to both parties. So the prosecutor always has the burden of establishing probable cause. The prior finding of probable cause creates a rebuttable presumption that there is probable cause. So it's just determining what the standards are for determining the disposition of the animal. So pretty simple concept. If the judge in this case finds a probable cause does exist, they may order the immediate forfeiture of the animal. And if after the hearing the court finds that no probable cause exists, the animal may also be returned to the owner or keeper of the animal. So basically that's, you get in front of a judge as soon as possible to determine ownership of the animal. This alleviates the cost that could be a burden to the prosecution. It also eliminates any due process concerns about basically selling the animal, otherwise getting rid of the animal before the owner of the animal has had their day in court. We did have a question over the committee meeting, whether those mays should be a shall, and the testimony we got from both the prosecutor and the defense public defender was that we should leave that up to the judge, give them full discretion instead of directing those outcomes via legislation. So interesting policy choice for us there on page 6, line 9 and line 12, whether it should be a may or a shall. Okay, so moving on, that's kind of the meat of the bill. We can move on to Title 11, which is the law of cleanup, taking those, for example, going on to page 7, line 13, making sure that we have consistent language, talking about what is a reasonable cost, further defining that, and making references back to what we did in Title 6 as far as getting before a judge. So that's basically the bill. Let's see, did I miss anything? Senator Cost, feel free to jump in and see if I missed anything here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, you did a very good job of covering it. I think everything that I would have said, you've done great.
Okay, all right, sounds good. That's a struggle for me, and you know, we did get lots of good input over the interim from those who practice law for a living. So I think we're in a pretty good spot here, especially. But I always get nervous when the Ag Committee starts messing around in Title 6, which are our criminal statutes. But like I said, it's the concept, I think, is fairly straightforward. I hope we've got the details right. If not, I'm sure we'll be corrected with the utmost urgency with our colleagues once this reaches the floor. But so any questions? I guess Senator French, Senator Cost. Okay. Well, that being said, we'll go ahead and just go over Senate File 26 briefly. This is quite a bit more straightforward in that it basically just takes the current statutes that are kind of, you know, if you read them, and Title 6 are kind of thrown together and hard to follow, and a lot of this is just kind of reorganizing it in a little bit more logical manner so it's easier to follow. But also there's some more substantive changes here on Senate File 26. And I'll see if I can't highlight those. And also for further reference, there was a, when this was a committee bill, back in the interim, there's lots of good staff comments as far as what some of the more substantive changes were, but there's very few of them. But we can go ahead and I guess highlight those. I'll highlight those best I can. First one, as far as changes goes, are on the bottom, page 3. That's subparagraph 4. We added which manifests extreme indifference to animals' safety, health, or life. That's something that's consistent with the rest of criminal code that was added on. And so it shouldn't change too much, but that was something that we wanted for consistency's sake. Let's see. There was also removal going on to page 4. A and B. In A, it had read unnecessarily fails to provide, and B was cruelly abandons the animal. We thought that those adjectives were superfluous, and and didn't really contribute much to the statute, so that we removed those words. Let's see, going on to page 6, line 11. That subparagraph C was just in a different spot, so we went ahead and added that since we're going by, I guess, escalating areas of seriousness. So as I put in our misdemeanors, because there's already misdemeanors, just in a slightly different spot, no material changes there. There's a delete of references to high misdemeanors. Told that is also superfluous. You just say it's a misdemeanor and tell the maximum fine and for jail time. I'd say the most significant change here is on top of page 7. For a second and subsequent conviction, we're talking about how you deal with an escalating amount of fines or jail time. If you have a second conviction, we put a 5-year time period within there. So if you are accused, found guilty of animal abuse 50 years ago, it's not going to be counted as a second offense if it's those are decades apart. Anything more than 5 years would be counted as another first offense. So that's my understanding. That's consistent with a lot of our other statutes. We also have a up to 6 months of jail and $5,000 fine, or both, for all these misdemeanors, for all the second offenses. So that is a change I'd like to highlight right off the bat for the committee. There's some other superfluous changes. Say on page 8, line 7, we add beats with cruelty instead of cruelly beats. Just a very small change there. Mostly make sure the verbiage is flows a little bit better. And then on page 12, at the starting on line 3 going to line 7, we changed out some old language there. I talked about reappropriating funds and inserted more standard language that's consistent with our laws there. Just saying that the funds in the account are going to be continuously reappropriated. So I think that basically covers it, committee. A lot of the rest of section 2, we're just updating, changing it and deleting the references to 6-3-203, and inserting the new references to the new area and statute these laws would be in, as well as at the very end, we'd repeal section 6-3-203. So that's Senate File 26. Any questions on that? Anything I missed, Senator Cost, first of all?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not that I'm pulling up. I think everything's covered that I had underlined. So I would say you've done it again remarkably well.
Okay, we'll find out how well we did here next week. But so any questions or discussion on these two bills? I hope that's clear as mud for everybody watching and for the public. And certainly, as we go to public comment, if I missed anything, I very well could have, please feel free to point that out. So if we have no discussion on the bills themselves, now that we know what they are, we'll go ahead and go to public comment. Once again, feel free to comment on any of these pieces of legislation, and we'll, or just comment generally if you'd like. So Mr. Sandoval, you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to mention that Mr. True from the Livestock Board had mentioned that he was available to speak with you about these topics if you wanted his input.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Ms. Turner. We'll get you to you in a second, but we have the member of the Wyoming Livestock Board. We try to do our state agencies first, and yeah, Mr. True is there. If he'd raise his hand, that'd make it easier for me. But that's okay. We'll get you up here. Yeah, Mr. True, welcome to the Ag Committee again. Once you get up here, if you're available, feel free to provide some comment and testimony.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
I think I've shoved the button the wrong way when I reached for my clicker there. So, Mr. Chairman, unless you have questions from the committee, I just wanted to reiterate, as from the interim, I think you've done fine work with these bills. I think you've cleared up a few places where it was occasionally potential for some miscommunication. So that would be my offering, Mr. Chairman, unless you have questions from you or the committee.
Okay, any questions for the Livestock Board? Okay, thank you, Mr. True. Appreciate your help over the interim, and certainly if you have any questions as the bill goes through the process, we'll be sure to reach out to you. Okay, I'll take a closer look at this list here. So yeah, if you members of the public, if you want to testify, or it looks like we even, I don't know if Representative Eklund wants to testify, he's still here.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Ms. Turner is still in the room. If she could put on her video. And
okay, great. Yeah, sounds good. Sorry for the interlude there, Ms. Turner, but welcome back. Looking forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. First, my sympathies on the loss of your colleague. I'm really sorry to hear it. My name is Monica Turner. I'm a dog owner, and I'm also the owner of a small local pet business here in Cheyenne. Today I came prepared to address 24, and I do thank you for deciding that is not an appropriate way to go forward. I do have some concerns about Senate Bill number 25 as well. The main concerns I have there are, first, the mention of somebody with authority to enforce. My question is, who is that? Is a member of a private nonprofit somebody with the ability to enforce this law? Also concerned, as you mentioned, with the wording of may be returned. And at the foundation level, this proposal still allows for a loss of property before a conviction. And I stand firmly against that, because animals are property, and depriving innocent citizens of property is contrary to the right of due process in our state's constitution, in our nation's constitution, and it's contrary to morality. Indeed, Section 33 of our state's constitution promises citizens just compensation for property that's been taken from them, not the other way around. But we all know it goes a lot deeper than that, because while animals are property, our pets are our best friends. So if you will engage in a little bit of imagination, I hope that you can imagine yourself in a scenario that's played out time after heartbreaking time in the states which do enforce laws that are similar to what's being proposed today. Someone decides that they don't like you for whatever reason. I know politicians can't relate to that. But they make an accusation that you've done a poor job in how you care for your dog. That person has to prove nothing, and the whirlwind begins. Your dog is taken, and under this proposed law, the clock's ticking. In addition to defending your innocence in court, you now have fewer than 2 weeks to provide the necessary bond, ransom, thousands of dollars, to prevent strangers from having the power to sell or kill your dog, your best friend. So you've been accused of a crime you didn't commit. It feels like everyone in the world is against you, and the one part of your life that you can rely on, your pet, is at stake for want of money. Later, you'll be found not guilty, but later it'll be too late. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, do you believe that most of your constituents can come up with $2,500 or more per dog within 10 days just to keep their pets safe? And do you believe it's fair to ask them to do that if they're innocent? Please consider instead measures which order restitution only after convictions, and which ensure the existing system in our state, which is the Cruelty to Household Pet Animals Protection Account, is expanded and used effectively and fairly in cases where restitution isn't recovered after conviction. So again, I beg you to reject any measure that requires bonds in advance from animal owners who've not been convicted of any crime. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions, committee? Senator French, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, for Ms. Turner's question, can you further define with the authority, with the people that have the authority to? My understanding, it's somebody from the livestock board or sheriff's department, or would you, for my benefit, define that for me?
Yeah, I believe it's the discussion was we can definitely double check anybody from law enforcement or the livestock board. It couldn't be just anybody. There has to be a duly sworn law enforcement officer. Senator French.
Yeah, one other thing, Mr. Chairman. I didn't see it in here, but is it made public if not every neighbor gets along, not every neighbor likes each other. If somebody makes an accusation that so-and-so is abusing their horses, their dogs, their cows, whatever it is, whatever animal it is their name made public? Because that might go a long way to, this person made an accusation because he hated his neighbor, and then the law enforcement's there knocking at your door, and on, and maybe you're suddenly in the system and you're scrambling to try to defend yourself, because any of us in the livestock industry have seen, if you have an old horse, you can throw as much food through it as possible, and sometimes it looks pretty thin, pretty rough, until it passes away. So is that public knowledge that so-and-so made this accusation?
Yeah, I think the important concept here is throughout our criminal justice system, and it's in the bill, is there has to be probable cause. So, the law enforcement officer or the livestock board agent would have to actually observe some sign of abuse. That you don't make these, you don't file charges based on hearsay. And so I think there's that element of our legal system that could be applied to any of these sorts of situations where somebody doesn't like you and they say something mean about you or try to accuse you of something. There has to be probable cause. So I think we have to rely on that element of our justice system as we make statute. Certainly, I mean, you could any of these statutes could be abused in the manner in which you're describing. It shouldn't prevent us from having our ability to enforce these laws. So yeah, I think that the probable cause element should provide you some confidence there. So anyways, any further questions for Ms. Turner? Okay, and just I guess I have, well, you mentioned a very specific number, $2,500. Is that based off of experience? And if you feel comfortable, could you just explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm from Cheyenne, and I have been watching some of the cases that I think have sort of spurred the need for some change in this area. And I have seen that the shelter reports that at their base level, they charge $25 per dog per day, just for board. And so my guesstimate was that would be the amount that they would ask for times 90 days, which is about $2,250.
Okay, very good. And that's, I think I'd highlight that's middle of page 2. It's the bond is set by the court, so by a judge. And so hopefully that'll alleviate some of that concern. It's just not whatever the animal shelter in this case decides it is. It has to be approved by the court, and also the animal would not be taken from anybody without a judge saying so. So that is, I think, qualifies as due process. So does that help alleviate some of your concerns, or?
Perhaps I've misread it, but when I read through this file, when they talked about forfeiture, that was only if the bond had been paid. So if within 10 days you don't pay the bond, it's irrelevant whether the judge orders forfeiture because you haven't paid the bond. If that is not the case, then that makes this a much more solid bill. Perhaps I've misread it.
Right, and it would just go back to the fact that they can't be unreasonable, and obviously there'd be ongoing costs of caring for the animal anyways. Presumably that you wouldn't be those expenses you would not be incurring if it was in somebody else's care, and we are relying on the judge to make a reasonable determination. But so you're not going to have a massive bill that would require forfeiture of the animal. So yeah, I do think that is concern. That concern is addressed in the middle of page 2, and yeah, I guess you'd have to be an attorney to know that or listen to the testimony. But absolutely something we can double check, and if there's holes in this bill, like I'm sure will be corrected. So any further questions for Ms. Turner? Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate your taking your time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, we'll just go ahead and let's see. Looks like we have Rocky Case, a city councilman from Cheyenne, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, sir? Oh, you're muted.
Apologies, former city councilman, Chairman. I appreciate that, though. But appreciate you taking a few minutes to hear what I have to say here. I do want to comment on Senator Coe, very heartfelt sorrow. In the mid-90s, I was an intern in the legislature, and looked to him as a mentor during those several months that I worked at the Capitol. So I'm with you guys there. So yeah, as a former member of the city council, and in the 4 years that I was on city council, I was the liaison to the Cheyenne Animal Shelter. And so I'm very familiar with the budget issues that the Cheyenne Animal Shelter deals with related to animal control. And we're very cognizant of that as we navigated through annual contracts each year. So the city of Cheyenne has contracted with Cheyenne Animal Shelter to provide animal control and sheltering since the 1990s. Some of this probably legislation that is currently in place, the increased burden of the animal shelter on their budget, to hold these animals for months on end, the lengthy court holds, and it really puts a significant portion of the Cheyenne Animal Shelter's budget under strain and jeopardizes their capability to provide those services. So it's my opinion that the cost of care, while court cases are being adjudicated, should fall to the owner of the animal or the defendant. In one scenario I saw for myself, 10 hound dogs, puppies, very young puppies that were took up an entire adoption room for many months. And these puppies basically grew up in the shelter, and they just wanted to be out of their cages at the shelter and be puppies and grow up. I don't know how most of those animals were disposed of after the case was dealt with, but certainly they missed a big opportunity to be trained in a good, loving family. So I'm definitely in support of this legislation, and I understand, and I'm speaking specific to 25, that it applies only to domestic animals, and that livestock are handled by the Wyoming Livestock Board. So I'd stand for any questions, but I do support this legislation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions, committee? Okay, thank you, Mr. Case. Appreciate your time and your service to the city of Cheyenne.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. Have a great day.
You too. Okay, looks like we have Rachel Burkness up next. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
You did. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the members of the committee. My name is Rachel Burkness. I am a felony prosecutor here at the District Attorney's Office in Laramie County. And I thought it would be important to just note a couple of effects that this bill would have on the District Attorney's Office here in prosecuting animal cruelty cases. Primarily, this would be a mechanism for which we could hold defendants responsible for their conduct, particularly those defendants who aren't actively seeking return of their animals. I personally had a case that I was prosecuting, an animal cruelty case in which the defendant did not seek return of his animal. He expressed that he did not care what happened to the animal, and that if he had to pay for the animal, he didn't want it back. And then he went through the normal life cycle of cases, as we have here in Laramie County, often reach that 6-month speedy trial mark, and at times exceed that 6-month speedy trial mark. And by the time that an animal has been impounded for that period of time, it often cannot be adopted. It is often not safe to even return that animal to the owner because of the effects that it has on the animal to impound them. And so in the case that I had, the state, at the request of Animal Control and the Cheyenne Animal Shelter, actually dismissed, it was criminal charges against an individual here in Laramie County, just out of compassion for the animal, because by the time he got to trial, we would have had an animal who's been impounded unnecessarily for longer than needed to be, just in the furtherance of potential criminal penalties for this individual. This could also potentially effectuate speedy disposition of certain animal cruelty cases in which a defendant seeks return of their animal. In my conversations with Sue Castaneda, who's the CEO of the Cheyenne Animal Shelter, as I'm sure you all are aware, the cost is about $25 per day to house animals that are not in need of any sort of special veterinary care. So for those reasons, I could understand a criminal defendant pushing for trial on a faster timeline that is typical. And I would also just like to address that there are a lot of cases in which property is taken from criminal defendants prior to conviction. And even liberty is taken from criminal defendants prior to a conviction, in which they are held until they can either post a bond, their property and their liberty being taken from them in that period. And their property is often evidence in criminal cases, as are the animals in animal cruelty cases. And that is temporarily taken from them in those cases prior to a conviction. Bonds also in Laramie County are generally set with a certain amount of input from the criminal defendants as to their ability to pay. I am in court daily setting bonds, and it's very frequent for courts to say, could you pay that bond? So that, I think, alleviates a little bit of the concern with respect to excessive requests of individuals to pay. What I had is $22.50 up front for a 90-day period. And if it were as short as 30 days, that's only $750 up front. But those costs are generally set. And when we're talking about bonds, mostly in the criminal context, those are bonds to seek release from confinement. But those are set with the input regarding financial condition. I also thought it was important to note that in subdivision Q7, there's a 14-day period to establish probable cause. From my perspective, that is plenty. Generally, what we have in felony cases is a 10-day period in which the state has to put on evidence to establish probable cause for felony cases to continue prosecution. So 14 days to establish the same thing in animal cruelty cases is absolutely sufficient and not an issue. And then finally, my reading of this bill as well does seem to indicate that the probable cause hearing to forfeit an animal would only be triggered when a bond is posted. Because if a bond is posted, that animal is already, the term is not forfeit, but the term is disposed of pursuant to subdivision Q3. So when you get to subdivision Q6, in which an individual can seek a probable cause hearing, that I believe would only come into play if bond had been posted. I also found it interesting to note that the individual who's permitted to seek a probable cause hearing must request forfeiture of the animal. In my experience in just criminal cases, I think most often it would be a defendant seeking a probable cause hearing, but I also wasn't part of the creation of this bill. So I'd be happy to stand for questions as to either the mechanisms of how I believe that this would work in the criminal justice system here in Laramie County, or just other effects that it would have on prosecuting criminal animal cruelty cases in Laramie County.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that that expert testimony. Committee, any questions? Okay, well, I appreciate the last thing you said, because it's something I noticed as well. You think it might be advisable to allow the defendant the opportunity to ask for the opportunity to determine ownership of the animal in subparagraph 7?
I do, and I think that's probably counterintuitive for a prosecutor to say. But if there are concerns about holding on to property, and animals are, as I think it was Ms. Turner mentioned, property that's very important to individuals, whether they've been accused of animal cruelty or not. I think it would be beneficial to well, I would just say this. In subdivision Q6, it does allow either party to request that probable cause hearing, but in order to do so, you have to ask that the court issue an order forfeiting the animal to the person with authority to enforce the section. So although both parties can technically request that probable cause hearing, you have to include that language seeking forfeiture. And if what you're actually seeking is a determination that there is no probable cause, which I could understand, that request doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of this, of the goals of this law. And I also think it just provides a little bit more due process protection. That is something that we in the district attorney's office could easily handle probable cause hearings within 10 days, 14 days, whatever it may be, to determine whether there's probable cause to continue holding an animal if that is what's necessary to effectuate this bill that would grant the bonds.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And so it would be, I mean, something as simple as at the bottom of, oh, where'd it go? Page 4 on the paragraph 6, you know, something along lines of line 23, adding or the defendant, the participant in the, oh wait, never mind. I think we might be good there. Sorry. Yeah.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. So it does say or other participant in the criminal action may file a petition in the criminal action. And I think it would make more sense, at least for my mind, a petition in the criminal action seeking a hearing pursuant to subdivision Q7.
Okay, so just further define what they'd be asking, I guess, in referencing paragraph 7.
So that they're seeking that hearing, but at the same time, they do not also, if they're defendant, requesting forfeiture of the animal in order to get a probable cause hearing.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your input, and glad to hear we don't have any, sounds like, major train wrecks in the bill as it stands, but it's just beginning of the process. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, we have Sue Castaneda with the Cheyenne Animal Shelter, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman Boner. And as well, my condolences on the loss of Senator Coe. My stepson grew up in Cody, and he had the privilege of one session getting to be a page for Senator Coe. So he was very good to my son. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I've testified before, and I think I've sent some information to you about the different cases that we've had in this past year of 2020. Not only is the need for this legislation to do with finances, which we'll talk about, but also, as stated before, an animal or animals become evidence. But whereas evidence such as a brick of cocaine, which will last for 5 years until a court case is adjudicated, an animal has to be caged for a number of months, and it causes kennel craziness. It causes them to become more aggressive and basically unadoptable by the time they do get out. So basically the victim, if it's a victim, an animal cruelty case, the victim then becomes victimized. So there is that part to it. Also, we have often tried to get money through the state legislature animal cruelty fund. It's a good thing to have, but we have to jump through quite a few hoops. On the case of the hound dogs, which just for, so that you know, the hound dogs were all adopted thanks basically to COVID, in that they all got fostered out and those people kept them. So that really worked for us. But they did get good homes, but they did grow up here. Again, back to the animal cruelty fund, we have to chase down, we have to prove that we have tried to get the money from the person. And so we've had to go to recovery offices, take your recovery services to do it. So that you really do jump through hoops to try to get it. And third, in 2020, I've noted that an unrecouped loss was $81,775 for all the different cases that we had to cover the cost of. We try most of our cases in district court or county. So our county animal control contract for last year was $235,872. So just the loss of these animals that we could not recoup the cost from the people took up 34% of that entire budget. So those are the points that I wanted to make. I'm happy to stand for questions. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the Cheyenne Animal Shelter Committee? Okay, certainly appreciate your advocacy and your information to give us some context as to how this plays out. I'm sure you'll be keeping close track of these bills as they go through the process.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, looks like we have Lynn Bashford. So you're up next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you.
You're not seeing me. I can see that. I'm Lynn Bashford from Powell. I'm with the representing the Sheriffs and Chiefs Association for Wyoming. I know you're disappointed that Byron isn't on today, but he had other obligations. So,
oh, I think we'll survive. I think you'll do just fine.
Anyway, we're in full support of both of these bills, actually all three of them, and so I don't want to belabor the situation anymore or discussion. Just know that we're in support of it, and we support the livestock board being able to enforce that stuff as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for the Sheriffs and Chief of Police? Okay, thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Representative Eklund's with us. Sorry, I didn't see you there. John, you got something you want to add?
Well, the question I have on this animal impoundment, the bill, it's probably in the bill, but I'm not real clear on it. So you have an animal that is impounded. And I've heard of a few cases where it would be and livestock animals are in here, and I think stock dogs fit under livestock maybe, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember the old rules and stuff. But I know of cases where animals were taken from the owners that were guard dogs that people thought had been abandoned or were being abused for whatever reason. The owner, it was shown through whatever proceedings, court proceedings or otherwise, that the animal wasn't a victim of cruelty or abuse. Then who picks up the tab for this? It shouldn't be the owner that had the impounded animal, the bond on it. And I'm not seeing in the bill where that's addressed, because it probably shouldn't be the animal shelter either. Who picks that tab up?
Yeah, good question. First, I mean, if you switch over to Senate File 26, there's specific exemption from animal cruelty laws. And it's on page 10 of that bill, line 15. It says nothing in this article may be construed to prohibit the use of dogs in the management of livestock by the owner of the livestock, his employees or agents or other persons in lawful custody of the livestock. So hopefully that alleviates the specific concern because it's exempted from our animal cruelty laws. I hope that's an accurate statement there. But as far as the general concern about who pays for the care of these animals while they are, I guess, forcibly removed from the owner's home, that's the reason why we have that initial hearing in this bill. Is yeah, sure, there would be some cost. That's why it's a priority. It's we're trying to shoot for 14 days so that we can determine ownership of the animal. The judge gets to determine that right up front, and so you don't have these compounding costs. And so it's I mean, I think I don't see any other way around having an animal shelter or a similar organization taking care of these animals while I mean, you have to have probable cause to begin with, right, to go over that. So it's not, there has to be some reason for it, and then, I just don't see a way around of having that being taken care of by an animal shelter or some other third party while the case is being, makes its way through court. So our goal here is to minimize those costs by getting the question of ownership of the animal taken care of as soon as possible. And so hopefully that answers your question, Representative. And so we're not keeping these animals, in limbo for months. It'll be hopefully weeks, and that will help minimize the cost. And as I stated before, if you're the owner of the animal, then you're not going to be feeding them, you're not going to be watering them, and it's there's some decreased costs there. But if you want to adjust that, I'd point you to page 2, line about 15 there and 16. It calls out what the costs are. So if you think that it should just be for board or nutritional care, not transportation, for example, that could help limit the costs there if you're concerned about that. So it's obviously there's going to be some additional costs associated with the board of the animal, but I think it'd be rather minimal. So anyways, hopefully that answers your question. We're trying to determine ownership and ultimate disposition animal, get somebody before a judge to figure that out at the outset. That way it'll minimize costs for everyone.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm not sure I'm clear on everything here. May I continue with it? The same line of question. The animal goes into impoundment, and the judge rules that it's the ownership of the person that had the animal for whatever reason. Then you go through some kind of a proceeding or court case to determine if cruelty had happened, or and suppose it hasn't happened. The judges decided, no, this person has not committed any kind of a crime. Then I'm not sure who's going to pay for it. It shouldn't be the owner of the dog or pet or whatever, and I don't think it should be the animal shelter either, because they were more or less ordered somehow through the court system. And I realized we've shortened the time maybe on it, but I guess, am I missing something in this bill that addresses that?
Okay, yeah, I think I understand you better now, and I'm drawn to page 6, line 11, where this is in reference to that initial hearing determining ownership. If after the hearing the court finds that no probable cause exists, the animal may be returned to the owner or keeper of the animal, and the owner or keeper shall not be responsible for any reasonable cost of the impoundment unless the person later pleads guilty or is found guilty. And so that hopefully that addresses your specific concern. And as far as the animal shelter goes, there is I think Ms. Castaneda referenced it, a fund available to help them compensate for costs. However, it is a bit of a challenge to get funding from that, from what I understand. And I mean, that's if you want to find a new revenue source, I trust you to go out and do that. But that could be a potential area that we could further mitigate those concerns with as far as the cost of the animal shelter.
Okay.
Okay, is that all, or you got anything else, or? Okay, any questions for Chairman Eklund? Okay, well, if you don't have anything else to add, sir, I think we're good here. So if last chance for public comment on this topic, go ahead and press the raise hand button if you're an attendee. If you want to comment, looks like we got everybody who's already testified. So with that, committee, public comment is closed. What's your pleasure, committee?
I'd like to move Bill Senate File 25, and then we'll do 26 later. I don't think we should move them both at the same time, okay?
I agree. Okay, so we've moved to Senate File 25. Any discussion?
I would call for the questions. I think we've heard them.
Okay, yep, I'll go ahead and I'm not feeling comfortable making the changes that we discussed with the Laramie County DA's office right now on the fly on the bottom of page 4, paragraph 6. But something we could definitely ask the staff for their position on, and that we can further refine that concept there. Yeah, any discussion or amendments on Senate File 25?
I was going to say, I would agree with you on that. I feel like something needs to be probably made there, but I don't feel comfortable making it right at this time.
Okay. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote on Senate File 25. Senator Bouchard.
He votes yes by proxy.
Senator French.
Yes.
Senator Cost.
Yes.
Senator Wasserberger.
He votes aye by proxy.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Any further motions, committee?
Yes, I would move we Senate File 26.
Okay.
Bit.
All right, very good. Any discussion? Senate File 26. Well, committee, I did have some input from my local weed and pest district on page 11, at the top of page 11, line 3. And this is in the exemption section. Technically, there's no exception for pests. And so I don't know if that's something that we want to amend in there. Hopefully it hasn't had a huge effect on the on the way our weed and pest districts actually operate. But just thought I'd throw it out there. I feel bad having animal cruelty bill going through the ag committee, not have more exemptions for agriculture related things. But I just thought I'd throw it out there and just want to get the committee's feelings on that.
What are your, Mr. Chairman, what are your thoughts on that right now?
I just, we're looking at page or paragraph 7, talking about, any hunting, capture, killing, or destruction of a predatory animal or other wildlife is not otherwise prohibited by law. That's exempted from our animal cruelty statutes. I don't know if it'd be prudent to add add pests like, a prairie dog, for example, in there. Technically, they're not exempted near as I can tell. But it doesn't have to happen today. It's something we could discuss on the floor, or we could just do it in the committee now. So it's up to you all. If somebody wants to make that motion, I'd certainly entertain it. If not, we can do it in the committee of the whole.
My concern is, Mr. Chairman, if we can't, I don't feel we can get an extensive coverage by listing them individually. So do you think just pets would be interjecting that in there would be appropriate?
Oh, pests, not pets, right? And just make sure I enunciate clearly. No, that's the question. And, we don't need to have the amendment here today, but I guess if nothing else, we can kind of throw that out there so the public's aware that's something that we would be considering. I haven't heard of an actual problem. In fact, I couldn't think of a Wyoming prosecutor who would pursue a case against the Weed and Pest District. But it was a concern as folks were looking at the legislation. So, okay. So that being said, any further discussion or comments, amendments on the bill? Okay, seeing that, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, just a second. I apologize.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote on Senate File 26. Senator Bouchard,
Senator Broussard votes aye by proxy.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Senator Wasserberger,
Senator Wasberger votes aye by proxy.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, committee, we still have Senate File 24 in our possession, but I suggest that it stays that way. We can just take no action on it, and we can always take it up later if we feel that's prudent. But for now, I suggest no further action on that piece of legislation. I think 25 does a superior job and covers all the same bases as 24. So any questions, comments from anybody before we adjourn?
Good job, sir.
Okay, yeah, well, thanks for everybody for, I think that went relatively smoothly. I think we're getting used to the Zoom thing. And thanks to all the members of the public who testified today. And of course, to our amazing LSO staff who makes it all work. So anything else before we adjourn? Okay, looks like we're adjourned. See you all, I believe, on Wednesday.